Welcome to the home of the DIY movement, where we build stuff and paint things.
All right, y'all, welcome back. Today is Saturday, July 26, 2025. It's about 7:30 in the morning. Rained last night, so I don't have my temperature gauge. It's in the other shop, but it's about 75, so it's kind of mild right now. Today's plan for the 62 is we're going to begin wet sanding this clear in preparation for Reclear. So it's been painted since 4th of July weekend, which is going on almost a month. So it is well cured. It's shrunk up, you know, it's done whatever it's going to do. I think we set it out. I set it out in the sun when it was 100 degrees for like a week maybe. So I think it's well cured, well dried. We're going to start cutting it with 600. Don't know how far we're going to get, but at least we're going to get some progress going. So real simple. We got a Diymovment 6-inch DA. You don't need a Diymovment. You can use an Amazon. And we got some Sunmite 600 sticky back sanding paper. I don't have an interface pad for a 6-inch. I wish I did, because that would be ideal. So we're just going to have to be really careful. Also, I got the motor guard 2-way block, and I got a Durablock, kind of soft, not really that soft. Like I say, kind of medium. Use a round paper. Boom. Okay. We also have these sanding sponges that he got on Amazon. They advertise as 600 grit, but I think they're more like 500. They're a little more coarse. So this will be for, you know, areas contoured, you know, something like this, or, you know, something like up in here, you know, an area like this, you know, sanding sponges. These go a long ways. So down to the nitty gritty. The finish on it right now looks decent, but it does have a lot of trash. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up. Nib City, especially on the flat panels. The flat panels are borderline, you know, bad. But they're real small nibs. They're just lint or pollen or dust. It's not a fisheye, but there's a bunch of them. There's a ton of them. Not gonna hide that fact. We sprayed this in a garage setting, and we sprayed it all in one day. Nibs. I don't know if the camera's picking them up or not. The main thing is the color is uniform and the material is on there. We have 3 coats of clear, so we're going to knock them down. Now, if you guys remember previous videos, I always say, I like to spray the panels hanging. So when we painted these, we couldn't hang them because of the pearl and the metallics in the color. We wanted it to be uniform. We wanted the hood to be uniform with the top of the fenders. We wanted the trunk to be uniform with the top of the quarters. So we didn't really have a choice but to spray these things flat. But now, when we go to Reclear, we are going to hang them. We're going to hang them in here, and I can guarantee you that we may get 3 nibs, maybe, or less, when we hang them in this room right here. Hanging them increases the chances of a cleaner paint job significantly. I can't emphasize that enough. So, I'm gonna knock all this down. 600 grit. Maybe use a gray Scotch Brite. For some areas, like in the jams, you know. And we're going to get ready to start clearing. I have to clean out this room and do that whole thing again. But that's the goal. We're going to start moving forward. So for sure, I'm going to get the moonroof cover and at least the deck lid. Might throw the hood in there for bonus, but we'll see how far we get along. I don't know who's going to show up today. But let me get set up. I'm going to do this outside and under the carport, bring you guys back. All right, while I'm out there wet sanding, when Bobby shows up, I'm gonna have him bust down these bumpers, because wet sanding 600 grit is not for not for an amateur. I mean, there's only one way to learn, right? But we definitely don't want to learn on that car. So here's his back bumper. It's been sitting back here for 2 or 3 years. Got original bumper guards. So we're going to bust it all down, get that ready for powder coat, see what condition the back bumper's in. Got the front bumper up here. I'm not sure how nice it is. I know the grill guard is bent. We're mainly going to get the brackets off of it and see what condition the bumper's in. I know the grill guard's bent for sure. I don't know about the rest of the bumper. See if it's re-chromable, if it's refixable. I would definitely recommend re-chroming the originals. Price has gone up. Used to get them for like $350 a front and $350 a rear. Now it's more like $700 a front, $700 a rear. But personally, I've never ran repop bumpers. Never really had to. I hear they're thinner, and I will bet my paycheck that the chrome quality is not as nice as a reputable shop can get the original bumpers redone. So I would emphasize, if you have original bumpers, to get those re-chromed versus running repop bumpers. Nothing wrong with repop bumpers, but if you're going for a really nice finish, you're going to want triple chrome bumpers. That's going to be Bobby's task today, is busting down these bumpers. Shouldn't take long. I'm going to use a Milwaukee fuel impact. It'll knock all these bolts off with the quickness. So, bring you guys back. Right, so here I am sanding down the moonroof shell or moonroof cover with the Diymovment. First thing I noticed right off the bat was that the PSI was way too high. I had it cranked up at like 110, which is what I normally run the DA at, but when you're using the DA to sand clear coat, you don't want it that high. So I cranked it down to probably about 40 PSI, so it spins a lot slower and it's a lot safer. You really don't want that thing buzzing at 110 PSI, going all over the edges and everything, because you're for sure gonna cut through on the edges. One thing to know whenever you're sanding like that is the edges are very thin, so you want to stay away from the edges. I mean, if you're just starting out, you know, you can tape the edges, which is what I used to do, but as you get better at it, you know, you just kind of know to stay away from the edges, because you will cut through real quick. The edges are really thin, even though we put 3 coats on. So I hit it with the DA, no interface pad, just kept it flat, and then I'm going over it now with the hand block. I think the hand block is more aggressive depending on how hard you press, but you can just get it better, I think, with the hand block. So I did both. I used the DA to kind of knock the tops off, then I went back with the hand block and knocked it down. And here I am using the sanding sponge. The sanding sponge is safe to use all the way up to the edge, like I'm doing right there. You just don't want to spend a lot of time on the edge. As you can see, I'm moving all around. I'm really not giving more than, you know, 3 or 4 passes in one particular spot. So the thing to know about the dirt nibs or the pollen or the lint or whatever lands on your paint job, if you're painting in a garage, is that it doesn't really matter as long as the lint or whatever lands on it is not a dark color or is not a contrasting color to the color of your paint. So all those little pollen nibs like that right there I just pointed at, you know, there's no color to them. I think they were pollen. So they, you know, once you sand them down, you know, it's gone. And now if it was a black bug or, you know, or green or hair or something like that, then, you know, that's not going to sand out. So at some point you have to make a decision on what you want to live with on the paint job. If you're painting in a garage or a shop, you know, you're going to get trash, you're going to get lint, you're going to get hair, you know, eyelashes or whatever. You just have to decide, when is it nice enough and is anybody ever going to notice? One thing I've learned, you know, doing these garage paint jobs is really the objective is to see how good you can fool the person looking at it. You know, how much can you get away with without, you know, being too obvious. And once you paint something, you learn that real quick. Is what can you get away with? What can you fool the human eye with? So as long as, like I say, as long as it's not a big old long hair or something like that, it all sand out. It's all gonna, end up, just fine. Here I am using the sanding sponge. Like I said, I think they're 500 grit, or I think they're definitely more coarse than the Sunmite 600. Just going over any little last minute, whenever you're sanding these panels like this for a Reclear, you want to get them as sanded as possible, but you don't have to. Doesn't have to be exactly 100%. You just want the whole thing dull. You want it flat. You want it free of trash, and you want it dull. So in areas where you can't get the block or the sandpaper, that's where you use a sanding sponge, or you can use the gray Scotch-Brite pad, which I believe is equivalent to about 1,000 grit, or maybe 800 to 1,000. I know the maroon Scotch-Brites are more coarse. I believe those are closer to 320 or 360 grit. You could use that, but I like using the gray. So here we are. The moonroof cover is done. It's flat. There's no more nibs. I went around the edges with the gray Scotch-Brite, and that's ready to bake in the sun. Whenever I'm sanding these panels, as soon as you start sanding them, you can smell the clear coat. It smells just like it is in the cup. So that means that it's dry, but it's not cured. So what you're doing basically is you're kind of cracking open the shell, and then you're letting it breathe. So as it breathes, it's probably going to shrink a little bit more, probably not noticeable to the eye. But if you can smell it, then that means it's still active. So I'm going to let these panels sit and gas out a little more. Here I am using the DA 6-inch, no interface pad, keeping it flat. You really don't want to sit there and gouge in with an edge, and you want to keep it moving. You definitely don't want to stay in one area, because that's when disaster can happen. And even though we got 3 layers of clear, you'd be really surprised how thin some areas are. Mainly the edges, and mainly contour areas, like a curve. At the peak of the curve, the clear is thinner than you think. So DA does speed things up. You don't need a DA, you don't need compressed air. You can do the entire thing by hand. DA just speeds it up, but I like to use a DA and then go over with the block, so you know that it's getting flat. Here I am. You notice I'm staying away from that curve of the front of the hood, staying away from that area. We're going to hit that with the block by hand and with the sanding sponges. Here I am, kind of showing what's left after using the DA. As you can see, it takes it down, but it doesn't take it down as fast as you think, because you're using 600 grit. It's totally different from 80 grit. It's totally different from 180. So it kind of just takes the tops off. You can see the little nibs there. Here I am. That's the finished product, I believe. I went back and sanded the whole thing by hand. Hit the front piece with the block and with the sponges. Also went around all the edges with the gray Scotch-Brite, because we're gonna throw some clear on the edges when we go to re-clear these panels. So the moonroof cover's done, the hood is done. Now we're getting ready to move on to the trunk or deck lid. Here's the deck lid. On video and daylight, looks fine. Looks like there's nothing wrong with it, but the whole thing is covered in nibs. Real small. Just assessing what we got here, what needs the most attention. Around this point, I made a decision not to re-clear the cove area where the tail lights go. That laid out pretty fine, pretty good. So we're gonna end up masking that off, and we're just gonna clear this flat panel here. You know, some people might be wondering why are we re-clearing the panel? Why don't you just wet sand and buff it? Which we could, but he just wants more clear. And you notice significantly once you spray clear over 600 grit, it flattens out, it slicks out almost immediately. It's totally different than spraying it on top of 3 coats of base coat. You think about, you're spraying the sealer and your 3 coats of base coat, that's 4 layers of sprayed material. When you finally get to the point to spray your clear, you're not spraying over a flat surface, you're spraying over a textured surface. So your clear coat is going to lay down with the same texture. It's going to be texture on top of texture, and depending on how good you are with the gun, that can determine how the overall finish looks. So essentially the goal is to sand it flat with 600, and then now you're spraying clear over a flat panel. So it's going to slick out significantly, and to the point that some areas may not even need to be wet sand and buffed. Probably just going to denib it or spot nib it, and then spot sand it, and then spot polish. That's what I did on the 60. A lot of the areas weren't wet sanded and buffed. It was fresh out the gun. So you essentially have 5 layers of clear, because we sprayed 3, we're sanding 1 off, and we're going to spray 3 more. So 3 minus 1 is 2, plus 3 is 5 layers of clear. So here I am, just going over all the edges. The sanding sponge, you see where I masked off. We're going to put that tape line right under the molding for the trunk, so you're never going to see it. That's where tape line's going to go, so we're not going to be re-clearing the cove area. So I think we're about ready to wrap this up. Trunk lid's done. This was about 6 hours of work in a 10-minute video. So it does take some time, but you definitely want to be careful. You don't want to burn through and open up a can of worms. So just take your time. By hand is the safest bet. Stay away from the edges. Right, if you made it this far in the video, it's time for the giveaway. As you can see, Bobby got all the bumpers busted down. I think the bumpers are rechromable. The grill guard's a no-go, and one of the rear bumper guards is a no-go. Brackets are going to get sandblasted and powder coated. We're going to be rechroming the original bumpers. Giveaway for this week is going to be for those who've known me for a while. With the recent passing of Hulk Hogan, if anybody can name the car that I used to own that came out on a wrestling match on national TV, I'll send you something.
All right, so we got the hood and trunk hung up. Got them all sanded down. We got the moonroof cover hung up using a little step ladder here. So I'm gonna let these things sit for about a week. Let them gas out a little bit more. Let them do their thing. That way, whenever we come back with the 3 more coats, it's gonna lay out and it shouldn't change anything. Anyways, these things just need a good wipe down, and then we're ready for clear. So I'm gonna let these things sit for about a week. Come back next Saturday, probably early in the morning. Have the ACs running the night before, and put 3 more coats of clear on this, man. It's been a long day. It's really hot, man. It's only 4:30. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this little video, man. Found it useful. Y'all stay tuned for more work. Thanks for watching.